Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Listen, we are in dire need of donations to keep these shows running and available for you 24/7. So that means when you're in the car, it's available for you to listen to. Whether you're at work, streaming, playing a game, it's available for you to listen to. Rowing your deen and learning about the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful different topics of Islam. Listen, one of the heaviest deeds that could be placed on your scale on the day of judgment is Sadaqah Jariyah. Yes, I know I'm trying to build deeds daily. So you can too. So listen, feel free and please, from the bottom of your heart, donate to this wonderful cause, wonderful website and platform to continually push out shows that will benefit you and the Muslim Ummah. Yes, you can donate by going to the Sunnahfollowers.net website, pressing the donate tab. You can also scan the QR code in YouTube on the far left top of our videos that are streaming. Listen, guys, this is very important, and take this as important. We want to keep this programming available for you 24/7 so that you have access in your car, anywhere you choose to tune in to this wonderful programming. Yes, guys, it's all at your disposal. So listen, feel free to donate. Once again, remember, Sadaqah Jariyah, one of the heaviest deeds on your scale on the day of judgment.
She was a woman strong in
Assalamu alaikum, Umi.
Wa alaikum salam, baby. What's going on?
Well, I was just curious and I just had a lot of questions.
It's great to have questions. Like, how can I help you, babe?
Like, can you name some ways where, we can get blessings?
Yeah. You know that programming mommy listens to almost every day, and she learns about her deen and the hadiths and the different stories in Islam. Do you remember?
Yes, I remember. And you let me listen to the programming on Sundays with the other kids?
That's right. They're called Sunnahfollowers, and they're amazing. So when mommy goes ahead and she makes a donation, she gets a big blessing. Alhamdulillah.
Really, Mommy?
And this is why it's so important that I donate, because I want to continue learning from Sunnah followers. So, what are we going to do next?
I put a couple dollars away. You think we can use that?
We sure can. How much you want to put in?
Mommy, I don't have a lot.
Hold on. Here you go. All right, Aisha, I got you. All right, let me scan this QR code. Wow, there we go. We made the donation. Alhamdulillah. May Allah reward you, baby. This is beautiful.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
Okay, go ahead and donate. Go to Sunnahfollowers.net and press that donate tab. Remember, Sadaqah Jariyah on your scale on the day of judgment. Another Sunnah Followers exclusive, Not One of Us, written by Sheikh Muhammad S. Adli, broken down and brought to you by host Layla Nashiba. Join us every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, right here on Sunnah Followers.
Her marriage itself was orchestrated in the heavens above. Born from an affluent family, she sprouted from greatness. She was known for her generosity, spirituality, kindness, and devotion. Unmatched, which is why it was important that she be married to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Although she was short in stature, the Prophet himself said amongst the mother of the believers she would meet him first who had the longest arms, which spoke volumes in regards to her generosity. Her name was Zaynab Bint Jahsh. Join host Layla Nashiba on another exciting installment in the Heroines of Islam series, every Monday and Wednesday 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central right here on Sunnah Followers.
Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me? I need somebody in Zoom to let me. Oh, here they can't. Hold on. Okay. Inshallah, everybody should be able to hear me. Can you guys hear me? I'm using a different computer.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Ina alhamdulillah wa salat wa salam ala wa rasulullah. Welcome to our series entitled Heroines of Islam. The Heroines of Islam. And alhamdulillah, I've received some very positive females from many of you about how you're really enjoying this series and how so many of you are emailing me, both the women and the men, about how you're learning things that you never knew. And it's kind of shocking to me that you guys don't know these things, because these things that I'm teaching about the wives of the prophet are all found in the authentic hadiths, mostly Bukhari and Muslim, and also Muwatta, subhanallah. That's where you'll find most of this information about these wives. It just goes to show that we read the wrong books and we need teachers. One of the emails I got, someone asked me, what book am I teaching from? I am not teaching from a book I know a lot, there's books out there. There's a book that I recommended that you guys buy called Heroines of Islam. But as you can see, I'm not using that information. A lot of the stuff I'm giving you is not from that book. What I do when I put these stories together, I go through the hadiths because I've memorized them by heart, and I've been taught the hadiths and their meaning by scholars of hadith. I didn't teach myself this religion. And it's something that I want everyone to know. You cannot pick up the hadith books and start reading and think you're going to learn a deen that way. No, because the hadiths are not in any type of synchronized order. You know, you read one hadith here, then another part of the same hadith, another 10, 20,000 pages later. So you have to study. You have to learn from the people of knowledge. I had hadith teachers. I had bona fide, qualified scholars of hadith teach me. I did not teach myself. And you have to know the Arabic. I don't speak Arabic fluently, but alhamdulillah, my teachers were Arabic and they had translators. I had translators who translated the Arabic into the English for me. And then when I hooked up with Sheikh Morsi, it became even easier and better, because he's a scholar of the hadith and he speaks English and Arabic. So you have to, I'm not using a book. I recommend that you guys buy the book from Darul Islam called Heroines of Islam, because it's a good book. But if for those of you who have it, you will see it doesn't contain all this stuff that I'm putting, because I spent a lot of time. I spent all day yesterday, all last night and today, getting this PowerPoint together for today. I had to go through all the sitta. I went through all the different hadith, the 7 different books, the collections, and just gathered up stuff, went through it, what's authentic, what isn't. And then I made a couple of phone calls too, because I do have some of the female scholars in the Emirates helping me. Because again, you have to know that Arabic, because a lot of the hadiths do not translate into English properly. So I had to get on WhatsApp and I had to call Sheikh Hiba and a couple of others, and they translated some stuff into English for me. So you can't teach yourself. And this is I'm not using a book other than the hadith books. I'm using the authentic hadiths, mostly Bukhari, Muslim, Muwatta, some Tirmidhi, some Dawood, and that. Does everybody understand that? But I recommend you guys buy Heroines of Islam, that book from Dar al-Islam, because you'll learn a lot of stuff through that too. Not what I'm teaching, but the basics. I'm going into more detail. Okay. So, alhamdulillah, we've covered 4 of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's wives so far. And also the way I'm teaching you is not like other people would teach by just reading out of a book. I'm giving you the history as to what happened, why he married these wives. I'm also breaking it down so you can see how his relationship with each wife was an example for all of us as to how to live in peace and contentment with our mates. I'm trying to take his story, the story of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his wives, and the problems that they had in their marriage. This is what I'm saying. I'm going into detail about the problems they had and the good times they had. So you can see that there is nothing that you are experiencing in your personal marriage that he hasn't already illustrated the way to us as to how to handle it or deal with it. We started off with Khadijah, radiallahu anha, his marriage to her. That's the best it's going to ever get. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship or perfect anything, because perfection only belongs to Allah. But his marriage to Khadijah is as close to perfection as you'll get. But what he had with her is hard to come by, because she's the second most perfect woman ever created, because of her devotion to Allah, her faith, her perseverance, and her practice. The only woman ever created better than her is Mary, the mother of Jesus. So you're never going to find a relationship like what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had with Khadijah. Even he couldn't find that after her death. That's why each wife, which I hope you guys see, each wife that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam married had components of Khadijah in them. Okay? Components of what made up as close to perfection in them. For example, right after her, he married Sauda, radiallahu anha. Sauda was an illustration of true sacrifice. How when we sacrifice all for the sake of Allah, Allah will reward us, because Sauda sacrificed everything, even herself, just to be on the good side with Allah, because she was an older woman. She was in her 50s and 60s. Because she was an older woman, she sacrificed her nights. She told the Prophet, you don't have to be with me at night because I'm not young. I'm not as attractive as the young other wives are. So I give my nights, I sacrifice my nights to Aisha so that you don't feel compelled to be with me. She said, and the reason why I'm sacrificing my nights to Aisha is because I want to die a mother of the believers. She said, I want that honor. So that shows the great sacrifice Sauda made. And even though she made that sacrifice, the Prophet still spent time with her, because she became the foundation of his family. She raised his children, and not just his kids, but all the other wives he married had children too. And they gravitated towards Sauda too, because Sauda made toys for them. She was fun to be around. She loved children. That was her thing, children. So they all would congregate at her house. Even the wives, except for Salama, even the other wives would congregate at Sauda's home. Her home became the foundation of the family. Okay. Sacrifice brings about that. And then he married Aisha, radiallahu anha. And we talked about how that relationship was an example of the push and pull. The push and pull. You love someone. Because with Aisha, he found as close to the love he had for Khadijah. He didn't love Aisha, by the way, more than he did Khadijah, radiallahu anha. Khadijah was the love of his life. But Aisha was second in that love. But it was a push and pull, unlike how it was with Khadijah, radiallahu anha. Okay? Aisha was young. She had to grow up. She suffered with what we women have known as jealousy. Her jealousy got in the way. Also, Aisha was young and mischievous. Also, she could be arrogant because she was a proud girl. Her father and mother raised her to be proud of who she was. She had the true Muslim identity. Okay, but her problem was learning to balance. Aisha, radiallahu anha, she had to learn to balance her love, balance her jealousy, balance that stuff. Whereas Khadijah, radiallahu anha, mastered that. She was balanced all the way. Okay, Khadijah, radiallahu anha, was never too far to the right, never too far to the left. She was perfect. She was balanced. She represents how we are a balanced nation. Okay? And then he married Hafsa, radiallahu anha. Hafsa, the daughter of Umar. And by the way, guys, Hafsa was the only wife that could read. Aisha, radiallahu anha, for those of you who don't know, could not read or write. And this is not uncommon because Allah even says it himself in the Quran. The Arabs were an illiterate nation. Very few of them knew how to read and write. So even though Aisha was brilliant, what made her brilliant was her photographic memory. Aisha had a photographic memory. She could remember anything, hear it one time, and she'd have her scribes come and write it down for her, and she could remember it. She was a poet too. The Arabs were known for that memory they had. They were not a literate nation. But Hafsa was different. And that made her stand out over Aisha was the fact that she could read. She could write. Okay? Umar could read. Umar could write. And he taught that to her and her brothers, all her siblings. Okay? Aisha, radiallahu anha, was never formally educated. And I want y'all to remember that. This is proven in the authentic hadiths. She was never formally educated. That's why she's so superior over so many in her deen. To not be formally educated, she was more intelligent than most of the men of her time because of that photographic memory. Okay? But Hafsa was literate. Hafsa had her own copy of the Quran. She didn't have any scribes to write it down for her. She kept her own mushaf. Aisha had a mushaf too, but it wasn't in her writing. It was her servant. Hafsa had her own mushaf. Okay, that's hadith too. We have to learn this deen, guys, the correct way from the authentic hadiths, not from fatwas, not from what your sheikh said, because most of your sheikhs don't know the hadiths either. I'm sorry, but it's a fact. We're in the days where the sunnah is disappearing. Most of these men learned how to memorize and recite the Quran. That's it. But they don't know nothing else about what it means or anything about the sunnah. I'm sorry. They'll tell you about the 40 hadiths of Imam Nawawi and the Riyadh Salihin, and that's it. They don't know nothing else. And those two books are not even sources. Riyadh Salihin is not a source, and neither is the 40 hadiths of Imam Nawawi. Those are not sources. Okay? And that's a different class, a different lecture. But anyway, so Hafsa, she was a literate woman. She was beautiful too, but his marriage to her was a marriage of control. Hafsa had the problem of trying to learn how to control herself because just like her father, she inherited his temper, her father's bad temper, and Hafsa's anger would get in the way. And through learning about his relationship with Hafsa, we learn as Muslim women, as wives, how to control our anger, like we learn how to control our jealousy from studying Aisha, radiallahu anha. And then we talked about who's become my favorite now, Salama, radiallahu anha. Salama, who so far has become one of my favorites. Why? Because number one, she was a warrior. They all were, but her more so than them. She was the cousin, the first cousin of Khalid bin Walid. She was trained in the sword. She was trained with the bow, the arrow. She can wield a pole. She was great on a horse, great on a camel. She was a true warrior. She was known as the lioness of Allah. Whereas her cousin was the sword of Allah, she was the lioness of Allah. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam married her, he made dua at her request, asking Allah to remove any jealousy and any female fitna from her heart, so that he could enjoy her and she can enjoy him free of the drama that comes in marriages, especially plural marriages, polygamy. So Allah answered that dua, and Salama represented his comfort. She gave him the comfort and the peace that Khadijah, radiallahu anha, could give him. He couldn't get that comfort and peace in from Aisha. Aisha was too inquisitive and too jealous. He couldn't get it with Hafsa. She couldn't control her anger. Plus, she let Aisha pull her into too much fitna. Sauda was all about the children and holding the family together. But Salama was for him. She was for him. She was for him. She was the one that he could go to cool out from dealing with the kafir, from dealing with the stress of the day. He could seek refuge in Salama. And not only because she was free of the drama, but also she was extremely intelligent, even more so than Aisha. What made her more intelligent than Aisha was her age. With age comes wisdom. Plus, she was a strategist. She was the one who became his war counselor. Whenever the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do battle, he would go to her. She would strategize with him because she was trained to do that by her father, who was the uncle of Khalid bin Walid. So Salama was his source of comfort, drama-free. He could talk to her about his problems. She could soothe them away, and she could give him solutions. She was the one that issued fatwas in regards to war and all of that. Plus, she could wield. He took her to every battle. Every battle the Prophet fought, he had Salama there as his war advisor. And she'd go out there and fight because she loved him and wanted to make sure nothing happened. He couldn't keep her in a tent. She was a trained warrior. She'd go out there with her cousin who had converted, Khalid bin Walid. She back to back. They'd be protecting the Prophet. Khalid bin Walid protecting both of them. But she didn't need it. She'd say, Khalid, I don't need your help. I got this. I can wield better than you. And she could. Lioness. She also checked Umar. Whereas everybody feared Umar, Salama feared no one. It wasn't in her blood. So when Umar dipped into the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam's personal business with his wives, Salama wasn't involved in the drama. But it was a meeting that all the wives had at the house of Hafsa. So she came to the meeting because all the wives were told to be present. It was the fitna that happened with the honey, Hafsa, Aisha, and all that. The honey. She stood in the back up against the wall because she's not taking part. And Umar came in there yelling at the wives, wanted to hit Hafsa. He told them they were crazy, went off, the women scared. And so she sat there and listened to him whoop. Then after a while, Salama said, wait a minute. She put her knife down and she went down. She said, Umar, you always dipping your nose where it doesn't belong. He shut up. Everybody shut up. She said, however the prophet runs his house, it ain't got nothing to do with you. She said, you need to take your nose and put it elsewhere than in this house or any of the houses of the prophet. Umar shut up, turned around, and left. And in his own words, he said, even I wouldn't deal with her because Salama didn't speak much. But when she did speak, she had a strong, powerful voice. And they knew she was ready to war. Like Khalid bin Walid. She speak. She ready to throw down. You got a problem with it, Aki? She was a toughie. My favorite now. So we did her story. And as we talked about, and I hope that the brother that asked the question is here, she was 29 when she married the prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she was the last wife to die. She outlived all the other wives. She died under the caliphate of Yazid, the son of Muawiyah. She died right after Hussein. They had killed Hussein, radiallahu anhu. And they say she died from a broken heart. She was in her 90s. And when she heard that he had been killed, him and his family at that Karbala, they say she passed out and she never recovered from that. She died a few days later. So that was Salama. So now we're going to do the next wife. And he married this wife right after he married Salama. Her story is long. Her story brings a lot of lessons. They say all the prophet's wives were beautiful. The three most beautiful ones was Aisha, Salama, and Zaynab. And that's whose story we're going to do today, the story of Zaynab, radiallahu anha. And she was the first cousin of the prophet. So I can believe that she probably was the second most beautiful. There's some people say that Salama was the second most. I believe it was Zaynab, because that's one of the things that made Aisha jealous, is how much her and the prophet looked alike, because they were first cousins. And the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was handsome. So I can imagine how beautiful Zaynab radiallahu anha was. Let's do her story. Let me put the PowerPoint up here and begin it for today. Okay, and I'm using my new computer, but all my stuff uploaded to it should be here from my other desktop. Okay, hold on. It says your content might be difficult to read. Get this out of here. Okay, it don't look difficult to me. Okay, here we go. Get this out of here. Okay. So, inshallah, you all can see my screen. This is the story, part one of the story of Zaynab bint Jahsh. Zaynab, the daughter of Jahsh. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam married her after Salama. But let's talk about her, because there's a lot to be learned through this union. First of all, Zaynab, she was the second Zaynab that he married. Y'all remember he had another wife named Zaynab, the daughter of Khuwaylid. Okay, she died. He only was married to her for 2 months and she died. Okay. Well, this Zaynab, he married in the 5th year after migrating. So he married her 2 years after Aisha then, because remember he married Aisha in the third year, was it? No. Aisha was, in the second or third year, and Hafsa in the second or third year, and then Salama, and then her. So he married Zaynab. And Zaynab, let me talk about this. I hope that all these sisters are here. Amina, I hope you're here. Not Amina Fresno, my other Amina. Let me put this down so I can see. Hold on. I want all you sisters who are single and who are old to understand Zaynab's story is a story of patience. Zaynab did not get married until she was in her 30s. I got a lot of sisters here who have a hard time accepting the qadr of Allah. You sisters upset because you done been married before. You women have been married before and had relationships and got children, but you're having a hard time accepting the qadr of Allah, that it just ain't in the cards right now for you to get married again. Well, I want y'all to learn from Zaynab. Zaynab, radiallahu anha. Okay, let's put this PowerPoint back up here. Zaynab, radiallahu anha, she was 36 years old when she married the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was her second husband. The year before she married Zayd, she was 35 when she married Zayd, and Zayd was her first husband. And this is another reason why there was some jealousy. Had she not married Zayd, she would have been a virgin. Had the Prophet married her like he originally wanted to do, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had always had his eye on Zaynab. Zaynab would have been a virgin just like Aisha. Okay, but the Prophet married her to Zayd first. That was Allah's way of keeping Aisha the only virgin he ever had. Y'all see that? Because Aisha could brag and boast. Remember, she couldn't brag and boast about being the only wife to ever receive the revelation, that for the Prophet to see the revelation with. Because when he married Salama, Jibreel stopped coming to Aisha's house and started going to Salama's, because that's the home of comfort. So she couldn't brag about that. So she bragged about, oh Allah, let it be that I'm the only virgin. If Allah hadn't answered her dua, she wouldn't have been the only virgin, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had his eye on Zaynab. Okay, but he had her marry Zayd first, and I'm going to tell you why, because there was a reason for that. Okay, let's take a look at this and what happened. First of all, Zaynab, radiallahu anha, she was the first cousin of the Prophet. Her mother, Umayma Bint Abdul Muttalib, was the sister of the Prophet Muhammad's father, Abdullah. Remember his father. Okay, so her mother was the Prophet's aunt. And her father was Jahsh, the son of Riyab, who was the son of Yamir. And her father came to settle in Mecca from another tribe, and he ended up marrying her mother. So her and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam were first cousins. And that's why I say they talk about how beautiful she was and how beautiful Salama was. I think she may have been more beautiful because they being so closely related, she had to look like them. Okay. And Zaynab was not her original name. Her original name was Bara. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam changed her name to Zaynab. And listen to this. Zaynab was a virgin, never married. She never married until she was 35. The reason being is because she always had a crush on the Prophet Muhammad, her cousin. And like I say, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam always had a liking for her too. They were closely related. They grew up together. That was his aunt's daughter. Okay, so she never got married because it was always her dream to marry the prophet. You know how we girls are. We can fall in love and we never get over it. I don't want nobody but him. You my boo. That's it. I just want my boo. I don't want nobody else. Just my boo. And that's how she was. She only wanted him. So she was single. Like I said, she would have been a virgin too. She was single and refused. And there were a lot of men that offered to marry her because she came from a rich family. She was from the tribe of Abdul Muttalib. They were wealthy. She was beautiful. She had class. They said she was very classy. She was educated, with manners. She wasn't barbaric like a lot of the other Arabic people were. She was mannerable and classy. And a lot of men wanted to marry her, but she held out because she wanted to marry the prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what happened? Well, she ended up marrying Zayd ibn Haritha. And you guys know who Zayd was. Zayd was the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's freed slave that he adopted. But they only stayed married for a year. Let's go into the story, the details about this. Okay. Zayd ibn Haritha, he was a slave and he belonged to the prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but the prophet had freed him. In fact, he was not born a slave. Zayd was born the son of a free family. But remember, I told you guys, these were the dark ages. Back in the dark ages, whenever the Arabs fought one another, whenever the tribes fought each other, the women and children went out on the battlefield too. And whoever won the battle took the children and women and made them slaves. Well, that's what happened with Zayd. Okay. Zayd was going with his mother to visit his relatives of the Ibn Tay tribe, and their caravan was raided, and Zayd was taken as a prisoner and sold in the Arabic slave market. This is what they did back in the dark ages. Not just the Arabs, the Vikings, the Europeans did it too. Like I said, children and women didn't have no rights back then. And Zayd was only 8 years old when this happened. So they raided his caravan, took him as a prisoner and sold him on the slave market. They sold him for 400 dirhams. And the person that bought him was a man named Hakim ibn Hatham. He bought him and gave him to his auntie, who was Khadijah, radiallahu anha. Okay. Khadijah was the first wife of the prophet. She she took the slave and she fell in love with Zayd because he was only 8 years old and he was a sweet kid. And she had just lost, every time she had a son, her sons would die in childbirth. She had just lost another male baby. So she decided that she would take this slave boy and give him to the prophet. And that's what she did. She brought him home and said, "Oh, Muhammad, here's a slave that I have. You can raise him. You do what you want with him. Raise him as a son." And that's what the prophet did. The prophet took Zayd at 8 years old under his wing. And in the meantime, when he was 10, when Zayd had become 10 years old, the prophet was going to free him. But Zayd didn't want to be freed. He said, "No, I want to stay your slave," because he fell in love with the prophet. The prophet was so lovable. And at this time, Zayd's family had been looking for him. And when they heard where he was, his father came with his uncle to Mecca and asked the prophet, "Can we take our child back? He was taken away during the robbery." And the prophet said, well, ask him. If Zayd wants to go back with you, then you can take him. So his father went to him and asked him, and Zayd said, no, I want to stay with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, you will find this whole beautiful story. This whole story is detailed out in Bukhari and Muslim, and also Muwatta. It's detailed out. Like I said, I don't use any books. I use the hadiths. Okay, the whole story is detailed out, but not in order. You have to go, you gotta be a person of knowledge to know how to look and find and put it together. Okay, so Zayd didn't want to go back with his father. Zayd wanted to stay with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And at this time, the Prophet wasn't even a prophet yet. And so his father said, "You rather be a slave than come home to me?" And he said, "Yes, Father, I have seen things with Muhammad that I've never seen before. So I don't want to leave him." Because remember, before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam became a prophet, remember, miracles were happening. Just like what happened with Halima, the woman who nursed him, her animals always had milk and stuff. So Zayd saw a lot of miraculous things. He said, "I want to stay with him. I don't want to leave him." So his father and uncle left, and that's how Zayd remained with the Prophet. The Prophet was so happy that Zayd chose him, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did what they did back in those days before Islam. He climbed on top of a rock in the middle of the Quraysh tribe and yelled and said, "From this day on, Zayd is no longer my slave. Instead, he is my son." And that's how he was adopted. That's how they did before Islam. If you would take a slave or something and make him your child, you would stand up and announce it to everybody in the marketplace. So that's how Zayd radiallahu anhu became the adopted son of the Prophet. And this was all before Islam. Okay? So let's continue. Zayd radiallahu anha never left the home of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when the Prophet Muhammad did receive the call to prophethood, as you all know, Zayd was one of the first to convert to Islam. Remember, Khadijah converted, her cousin Waraka reverted, Abu Bakr, Zayd, Ali, he was one of the first to convert. And after Hamza, radiallahu anhu, became Muslim. Y'all remember Hamza? Hamza was the uncle of the Prophet. When Hamza converted to Islam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made him Zayd's brother, so that Hamza could look out for Zayd, because remember, he loved Zayd. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would ever be abused, Zayd would throw his own self over the Prophet to protect him. That's how much he loved him. Even when the Muslims ran away at the city of Taif, and they threw rocks at him, Zayd put his whole body on top of the Prophet to protect him from being harmed. That's how close they were. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took to Zayd like a father. And one day, and I want you guys to understand this, because this is going to be news for a lot of you. This is going to be news for a lot of you. This is why you can't read hadiths and think you know the religion and you don't know the history, the time. One day, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in the marketplace, "Whoever wants to marry a woman of paradise should marry Ayman, who is my mother after my mother." Now you guys know who Ayman is. She was the slave girl who raised the Prophet after his mother died. The Prophet announced this because he wanted to see his mother, the woman that raised him, get married. He said, who would marry her? She was a slave from Ethiopia. And of course, nobody wanted to marry a slave from Ethiopia. Well, Zayd stood up He said, I'll marry her. And so that's when Zayd radiallahu anha was married to Ayman. So he married her before Zaynab. And I hear a lot of Muslim men talk about this. That's why I tell y'all, be careful. When y'all listen to these famous celebrity imams on YouTube, they don't have their facts right. I was listening to this one brother do the story of the female companions, and they say, how many of them tell y'all that Zayd married Ayman after he divorced Zaynab? That's not true. These brothers don't know the hadith. You will never understand the Quran until you learn the hadiths. You will never learn the history of Islam until you learn the hadiths. So Zayd married Ayman. That was his wife, and he loved her, and she loved him, and they had a son together. And the son was Usama, as you guys know. My cousin Mukhtar talked about him. So Zayd grew up under the care of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he married the woman that raised the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they had a very happy marriage, a very happy marriage. And then one day, Zayd decided that he wanted to do what was the custom of all the men. He wanted to take on a second wife. Okay? So Ayman, even though she was older than Zayd, Zayd wanted to show respect for her. So he approached her and he said, honey, I want to take on another wife. She said, well, okay, go ask the Prophet. Whatever the Prophet tells you I don't have a problem with. That was the custom. So Zayd radiallahu anha went to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and told him that he wanted to marry again, to take on a second wife. So that's when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam arranged for him to marry Zaynab. Zaynab, his first cousin, because it showed how much the Prophet loved Zayd. I'm going to keep you in my family. I'm going to let you marry my cousin, my first cousin. And also this will show, because this is at the time Islam was growing. The Prophet was trying to teach the Arabs that the rich are not better than the poor, that social status, the color of your skin, none of that stuff should matter. He was trying to teach them wala wal bara, allegiance. What does la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah mean? It means I have allegiance to Allah, allegiance to the Prophet, and allegiance to the Muslims, no matter what skin color they are, no matter where they come from, what language they speak, what tribe they're from. So when Zayd came to him, because what happened was the Prophet was trying to figure out what he could do to unite the Muslims as one, because there was so much animosity between the different tribes. Remember, this was after he had married the first Zaynab. Remember, he had married her to bring her tribe under the umbrella of peace with the Muslims. She died. That her tribe were the ones that killed the reciters who came to try to give them dawah. So the Prophet was trying to figure out, what can I do to illustrate to the people that we're supposed to be upon el wala wal bara. And when Zayd approached him, that's when the Prophet said, wait, this is a way. Zaynab is beautiful. Zaynab is rich. Zaynab is someone from me, close to me. And Zayd is an ex-slave. Zayd is not attractive. Zayd is not rich. But Zayd is someone close to me. Let me bring these two together, and then perhaps the Muslims will see that we're united. So that's how that idea came. Even though the prophet in his heart wanted Zaynab for himself, because Zaynab, it was no mystery. Everybody knew that she was turning down offers of marriage at the age of 35 because she wanted to be with the prophet. Everybody knew that. So the prophet was basically sacrificing of himself. Like I say, his marriage to her is an example of patience, sacrifice, all of that, to bring unity, solidarity amongst the tribes. Okay. So that's how that came. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Zayd that he will arrange for him to marry Zaynab, the Prophet then went to Zaynab and her family. And when he talked about marriage, they thought he was asking for her. So her father was like, yeah, we were waiting for you to come and marry her. Go ahead. He said, no, 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 no. He said, I'm not asking for her hand for me. He said, I'm asking for her hand for Zayd. And her family said, no way, Jose. They told him, no way. There's no way we're going to marry her to an ex-slave. There's no way we're going to marry her to him. We were holding out for you, O Muhammad. We kept her single all this time for you. And that's when Allah, that's when Allah sent down the verse in the Quran that says, in the interpretation, the meaning, the most honorable of you in the sight of Allah is those of you who is most righteous. And that's when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam announced to the people, he said, oh people, your Lord is one. Your Father is one. There's no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, or a non-Arab over an Arab, or a red man over a black, or black over red. He said, the only thing Allah cares about is your consciousness of him. He said, Allah doesn't look at your appearance or your property. He examines your heart and deeds. So here you can see the Prophet was upset. He said, you don't want to marry her to him because he's poor. He's an ex-slave. Are you crazy? We got to be united. Okay. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very upset in the beginning that her family refused Zayd. He was very upset that he couldn't think of any other way to bring about unity and equality amongst the people. And even though the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke of Zayd's value in Islam and in his own family to Zaynab and her family, they still could not accept him. I mean, the Prophet spent a lot of time talking to Zaynab and her family. Zaynab was crying. Zaynab's thing was, but I wanted to marry him. Do you marry you, O Prophet? She just kept saying that. And her family kept telling him, oh, Muhammad, we saved her for you. We saved her for you. And then finally, Allah sent another verse of the Quran down. He said, it is not fitting for a believing man or a believing woman that when something has been decided by Allah and his prophet, for you to object to their decision. If anyone disobeys Allah and his prophet, then you're on the wrong path. When that verse came down, that's when Zaynab changed her mind, because one thing about Zaynab, not only was she related to him in blood, but she had that belief in Allah. Zaynab loved Allah. She would never do anything to make Allah angry. So when Allah sent that verse down, talking to her and her family, she changed her mind and said, okay, I'll marry him. Okay. And when she agreed to marry Zayd, the Prophet was happy. He thought, okay, this will bring the Muslims together. This will unite us as one. We'll stop all this tribalism, all this racism, and all this craziness. But that's not how it worked. But like I said, if he had married her, she would have been a virgin because she was 35 and her family held her to him. And he had his eye on her too. Okay? Aisha would have lost that too. But Allah let Aisha have that one. Okay? Alhamdulillah. So, Zayd and Zaynab married, but their marriage did not last but 1 year. Some people say less than a year because they couldn't stand each other. Zaynab was Zayd looked at Zaynab as being arrogant and proud, and she looked down on him as being weak and ugly. She thought he was very unattractive. They couldn't stand each other. They used to argue all the time, and they said horrific, hurtful words to one another. And this is sad, but there's a lot of hadiths that address how they used to hurt each other verbally, because Zaynab was very outspoken. She would call him names, okay? Poor man, ex-slave. And Zayd couldn't put up with her arrogance and the way she treated to him, the way she talked to him. She was the total opposite of Ayman. Ayman and him had a beautiful marriage, a beautiful relationship. But they tried to make it work. They stayed together for almost a year to try to make it work, but it just couldn't work. I mean, sometimes we marry somebody and we try to work it out for the sake of Allah, but we just don't vibe. You know, we just can't make it work. We're just different opposite sides of the track. And that's why I tell you women, your father, he has the right to turn you down, a man down. Zayd was righteous. And Zaynab herself says Zayd was a good man. He believed in Allah. He fulfilled his obligations, she said, but he just wasn't for me. He was not for me. We came from different sides of the track. So that's why your father can say, I don't want you to marry this man because he's from a different culture. That's a big problem in a lot of marriages, different cultures. Zayd was a different culture than Zaynab. His lifestyle was different than hers. She lived the rich luxury lifestyle. He was a slave since childhood. Okay? So if your father tells you no, he doesn't want you marrying this person because they're a different race or they're a different culture, your father's looking out for you, because it's hard to make those type of marriages, those type of relationships work, because you don't have nothing in common. All we have in common is our love for Allah. That's what it was with Zaynab and Zayd. They both loved Allah. They both loved the Prophet. They both loved Islam. They both would jihad for Islam, but that's all they had in common. It's more than just that. It's more than just religion. Remember, it's a time for this and a time for that. There's a time to pray and there's a time to play. You know, they had nothing else in common other than we love Allah, we love the Prophet, let's go fight. Let's go out and fight the Quraysh. That's all they had in common. Okay? So, one day, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to visit Zayd because he had heard about Zayd and Zaynab's arguing becoming even more intense. And he heard that Zayd was almost at his wit's end. Ayman had told him. So he went to visit Zayd, hoping that he could change Zayd's attitude and get him and Zaynab to try to work it out. But when he went there, Zayd wasn't home. Zaynab invited him inside, but the Prophet said no. But when he saw how sad Zaynab looked, Zaynab stood there. She looked miserable and she looked sad. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, how mighty is Allah. He's the one that transforms the heart from one state to another. And then he walked away. That's when the Prophet knew this ain't gonna work. Zayd wasn't there, and she looked terrible. She came to the door. He ain't here. You want to come in? He said you could see the sadness. The light in her eyes was gone, because remember, he had his eye on her. The light was gone from her eyes. You could see she was not happy. And it was sad, because when the prophet made this statement, when he said, how mighty is Allah? Allah is the one who transforms the heart from one state to another. What he meant was this. He was surprised that Zayd, who had married a woman older than him, who was Ayman. Ayman was much older than Zayd. Even though she was older than him, they were happy. They had a happy marriage. And now he married a woman who was younger and who was beautiful, but they couldn't get along. They hated each other. And that's when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam realized that the failure of people to feel emotions towards one another is a condition that comes from Allah. You can't make somebody love each other. The Prophet Muhammad really wanted to illustrate to the Muslims, the companions, that where we come from in life shouldn't matter. That Islam should be the one thing that unites us. But he couldn't prove that. These two people were just broken. They were broken. They were broken mentally and physically. So, and every time Zayd would go to the Prophet and tell him he wanted to divorce Zaynab, the Prophet would tell him to fear Allah, hold on to her, don't divorce her, because he wanted to show something to the people. But unfortunately, Zayd could not tolerate living in this animosity any longer. So he divorced Zaynab, and he did not tell the Prophet that he had divorced her. How did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam find out that Zayd had issued the words of talaq to Zaynab? He learned it through a dream, a revelation. Allah sent the revelation to the Prophet and told him Zayd issued the words of talaq to Zaynab. And since Zayd has issued the words of divorce to Zaynab, I am marrying you to her, because Allah knew that the Prophet Muhammad had always wanted Zaynab for himself. But see, Allah answered the dua of Aisha, radiallahu anha. That was Aisha's dua. Oh Allah, let me be the only virgin. Let me be the only virgin. Let me be the only virgin. Okay? Since Salama took away the revelation part, Hafsa is the daughter of his other best friend. Let me have one thing, one claim. That was a dua that Aisha made. Allah answered her dua. And so Allah sent that revelation to the Prophet. Zayd has divorced his wife. Now I'm going to marry her to you. Subhanallah. See how Allah works? Allah is in control of the heart. The Prophet learned that. Allah chose to not allow those two to vibe. Allah is the one that can make us love and make us hate. And Allah chose to listen to my girl Aisha's dua. It's amazing. I mean, I don't know if y'all get this, but as a daya, this is amazing for me. I just get it. I just get it. Okay. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he woke up from this dream, he decided to not tell it to nobody at first, because he didn't know how the people were going to react. Number one, Zayd was his adopted son. This is before Allah sent the command down for adoption, guys. This is before Allah made adoption haram. So when the Prophet had that dream, imagine him waking up shocked Zayd divorced, I can marry her. Allah is marrying her to me. He's always wanted Zaynab. But Zayd is my adopted son. How can I marry my son's wife? So this is the dilemma that the prophet was in. He woke up from that dream sweaty and was like, what do I do? This woman I always wanted, but that's my son. That's my son. This is where we're going to stop today. When we meet in this class again next week, we're going to pick up from here what happened. How did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam deal with this manifestation that his adopted son had divorced the woman he originally wanted to marry, and Allah married him to her, but he's my son. So we're going to pick up from that the next time we meet. So again, there's so much to learn from these stories of the wives, you know. And remember, as I'm telling you about one wife, remember he's still married to them others. And by the way, whose house was he at? Whose house was he at when he had that dream? Salama. Like I said, her home was comfort. Salama was the one he could seek the refuge with. Okay. And that's when he had that dream. So I'm going to stop right here. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Are there any questions? And all of this that I'm teaching you is not from some book that you can go buy in a store written by Peter, Tom, and Dick. This is all taken from the authentic hadiths. You can find all of this stuff in Bukhari, Muslim, Muwatta, Tirmidhi, Dawood, and others. And they're all authentic. Everything I'm teaching you is authentic. All right. Any questions or comments? Okay. Any questions or comments? Go ahead.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Leila, for this beautiful story, mashallah. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to hear the story of Zaynab. I have Zaynab in my house, subhanallah.
Yeah.
When you're talking about she talk like that, I was thinking about my Zaynab in my house. I said, that's where she got it.
Exactly.
Subhanallah.
Exactly. Subhanallah. Yeah, and you guys see, I can see Aisha sitting there, boy. Aisha, woo! Zaynab was 35 years old, virgin girl. Hello. Allah, let Aisha keep that. Yeah. Okay, there's no other questions or comments. Then what I want to do is go into this next hadith, because we have this class, Beware. Wait a minute, here's a question here. Do you see any new sis join through YouTube? Okay, Sister Laylee, I can't see. When people come in on YouTube, I don't know who's there unless they type. So if a person doesn't type hello or assalamu alaikum, I don't know who all is in there because of the program I'm doing. Yeah, if they don't type, I don't know who's there. Listen. Oh, okay. So I don't know who's there. Unless they type, I can't tell y'all who's in there because I'm using this streaming program. Even on the other platforms, unless they type something, I don't know if they're in there either. Okay, let's put the hadith up for the next class so we can look at the hadith for tonight from the book Beware. And again, for those of you who have not bought the book, you want to make sure you do so. Let me put the, this is the Beware book. Ya ina alhamdulillah wa salat wa salam ala wa rasulullah. Alhamdulillah, if you have not yet bought that book, Beware, make sure you go to www.atleonline.com, and that's where you can get that book. It's only what, $4? And also pick up the other book entitled Not One of Us. Those are the two hadith books that we're using for this class. Not One of Us, which will be tomorrow, and Beware. Okay, and they're both at atleonline.com. Okay, let's go over this hadith for tonight, and let me put it up. I did do the PowerPoint for it. Hold on, let me come out of this one. Where's it at, guys? Wait a minute. I did the hadith. I can't find it. Beware. Oh, here it is. I was going to say, I know it's on here. My new computer. Okay, here it is. Beware. It's just one hadith, and it's a short hadith. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at it. This hadith, it speaks about beware of waiting. Beware of waiting. Waiting for what? Well, let's take a look at the hadith. This hadith is narrated by Ibn Umar. He said that one day the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took him by the shoulders, and he said, be in this world as if you were a stranger. Be like someone who is simply passing through. And after he told him that, Ibn Umar used to say, every evening, in the evening, do not expect to live to see the morning. And should you live to see the morning, then don't expect to live to see the evening. Instead, take something when in good health that will serve you in illness, and take something in your life that will serve you in your death. This is one of my favorite hadiths. And I live this hadith every day. Be in this world as if you were a stranger, simply passing through. In other words, don't get too attached to anything here. Don't attach yourself. Don't get too close to the people, because the people are not going to be able to help you when it counts on the day of judgment. And don't attach yourself to the things in this world either, because the things here are not going to be of no help to you. Instead, we should live each day as if it were our last day on earth. If you live to see the morning, pretend like you won't live to see the night. And if you live through the night, pretend like you won't live to see the morning, because that way, if we thought that this was our last day on earth, and if we did not attach too close, if we did not get too closely attached to the things here, what would we do? How would we spend our time? We'd spend our time doing the deeds that are pleasing to Allah. We'd make better choices for ourselves. We'd make better decisions for ourselves. We would think twice before we do things. If we thought that this was our last moment on earth, we'd spend more time praying, more times thanking Allah, more time repenting, more time reflecting on how to better our condition, how to better ourselves, not for this world, but for Allah. So this was great advice that our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to Ibn Umar when Ibn Umar was a young boy. And it's the same advice that my stepfather gave to me when I was a young girl. And I've been living this advice all my life. I never expect to see tomorrow. I always say I got one foot in the grave. So I try to spend each day, each night, doing what's pleasing to Allah. That's why I stay on this computer. If I'm not sitting here teaching, I'm doing PowerPoint. I'm doing videos. Because when I leave this stuff, that's when I get in trouble. That's when I get in trouble doing things I shouldn't do. So we need to take this advice, get our priorities put in order. Okay? So there's many lessons to learn from this hadith. Number one, both strangers and travelers should not give much thought to irrelevant, mundane things around them. Also, this world is only a means to the hereafter. We were created to worship Allah. Allah put us here on this earth to test us in our belief in Him. So don't get too invested with this world and the glamour here. And don't get too possessed with the material things here. Never lose focus. Never lose focus as to what your purpose is. Never lose focus. Never lose focus as to what the ultimate goal of every one of us should be, which is paradise. So this is a wonderful hadith, a wonderful way for us to end today's class, the classes. Live as if this were your last moment here. Don't expect to see tomorrow. Be a stranger. Don't get too attached to anything, anyone. Attachment should be to Allah. All right. So I'm going to stop right here. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Are there any questions or comments? And I did see a question on YouTube. Let me look at it. Hold on. Okay, here's a question on YouTube. A sister wants to know, what do we do if someone's parents are involved in remembering? Nothing you can do. Allah doesn't hold you accountable. Allah doesn't hold you accountable for the sins of someone else. Unfortunately, many of your parents worship other than Allah. That's just how it is. I mean, there's going to be more people in hell than paradise. All you can do is make dua for them. Make dua asking Allah to guide your parents to the truth. Make dua asking Allah to guide your parents to Siratul Mustaqim. But that's all you can do. Allah doesn't punish you for what they do. If they do it, that's their problem. And they're not going to accept correction from you because they look at you as a kid. So pray for them. Make dua for them. The power of supplication. Y'all see how well Aisha, radiallahu an, her supplication worked. She prayed for Allah to let her be the only virgin. Allah gave her that because it could have been Zaynab too. So the power of supplication. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Tomorrow's 9 o'clock class. Okay. The 9 o'clock class tomorrow is not one of us. And tomorrow for the 6 o'clock class, we're going to finish up chapter 9 of Diluting Wala Walbara. So finish up the chapter and I'm going to give y'all a quiz too. So this is that. Y'all see that? The book there. Yeah, that's the book, Diluting El-Wala Wal-Bara. Finish up that chapter 9, and I'll give you guys a quiz on that at 6 o'clock. Okay? Also, guys, please remember, this is the first of the month, and we have our website expenses to pay. Y'all know that this streaming program is $300 a month. It comes out the first week of the month. So please, I need donations to cover the stream, which is $300. It costs $2,000 a month to run this organization. This website is our organization. We are a nonprofit organization. It costs $2,000 a month, which is not a lot of money, but it's a lot of money for us because we're not affiliated with a masjid. You know, if we were a mosque, $2,000 to cover masjid expenses, that's nothing. But we're not a mosque, we're a website. So please, guys, support us. Click on, scan that QR code and send your donations in. You know, if you want to continue, you know, to learn Islam and its truthfulness with the understanding of the companions like you are. Yeah, please support us. Okay, any other questions or comments before we close out for tonight? This new computer works pretty good, huh? No problems. I didn't black out, I see. No blackouts. And it seems to be faster. Well, it is. It better be faster than the other one. Oh. Okay, so I'm going to close out for tonight. Inshallah, I'll see everybody tomorrow at 6. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Everybody have a good night, inshallah.